Number 10, The Red Lady. Here's a story that dates back to 1910, but almost any student at Huntington College in Montgomery, Alabama should recognize it. That's because the events that led up to it are said to have actually happened. As the story goes, in 1910, a young woman who was new to the school was known for her love of the color red. Sadly, she was also known for being strange and a loner. As the first term got underway, the young woman grew increasingly isolated. Eventually, she took her life by slashing her wrists. Her body was discovered in a red gown drenched in blood. From then on, students and faculty have been reporting sightings of a young woman dressed all in red. She's appeared all around the college's campus. The figure, dwelling in perpetual isolation, is often cited as a reminder of the importance of being kind to one's peers. Number 9, Frederick Jordan's Ghost. This real-life ghost story concerns a man named Frederick Jordan who held one of the most lonely and desolate jobs in existence. Jordan was the lighthouse keeper for Penfield Reef Lighthouse off the coast of Fairfield, Connecticut. The lighthouse was primarily a way of warning ships of a treacherous hidden reef responsible for many than its fair share of harbor incidents. In 1916, Frederick Jordan was the head lighthouse keeper. Tragically, he drowned in a boating accident just before Christmas of that year, when he was caught in a gale while rowing home to see his family. Ever since then, lighting and equipment malfunctions in the lighthouse have been blamed on Jordan's spiritual presence. But even more chilling is that keepers on the Penfield Reef Lighthouse often find the lighthouse logbook open to the day Jordan passed, and locals have recounted witnessing an unidentifiable figure appearing in the water to help stray boats find their way to safety near the reef. Number 8, The Hanged Man. One theme that many ghost stories have in common is that they offer a sense of justice in return for a wrongful passing. This particular ghost story, however, offers a somewhat different take. It's about wrongful treatment in passing and revenge in the afterlife. On October 13, 1877, Robert Schmale was hanged after a trial that found him guilty of a terrifying and inexplicable execution spree. The townspeople were filled with so much anger and hatred that they left his body hanging for days. The tale says not one of the townspeople demonstrated even a shred of remorse, let alone forgiveness. Since then, Schmale has been said to haunt the town. Those who have seen him say he appears as a ghostly male figure, but as soon as the figure registers in your mind, it disappears, somewhat maddeningly, into the darkness. Number 7, The Voice of Youth. I was camping with my husband and his family at a small remote lake in New Mexico. There were about 10 people in our group and another group of 6 people in the next campsite. It was nighttime and both groups were doing typical activities, making s'mores, having a few drinks, and telling stories, when we all heard what sounded like a little girl yelling out for help. Neither group had children with them, but we were all positive we were hearing a little girl, and decided to search the area where we heard the noises from together. There was a field behind our campsites, and we all saw a very tall, pure white figure standing maybe 100 feet away from us in the field, making the noises. We all agreed this thing looked maybe 6 feet tall, skinny, and white as can be. We made our way closer to investigate, but whatever it was we saw started backing off as we got closer, and it disappeared into the trees. All night we continued to hear a little girl calling for help as we tried to sleep. Number 6, Rest Stop Blues. I was driving across country with my mom and sister when I was 16 and my sister was 20. It was late, but we were still well rested and alert. We were driving along an interstate and needed gas and a bathroom break, so we stopped at the only rest stop in 200 miles. There was a van full of teenagers on a road trip at the gas station, as well as a small gray car parked at the pump in front of us, with 2 young men standing still outside of it. When we got there, everything felt wrong. We'd been on the road for days and seen many rest stops at night, and never been afraid until then. My mom and sister went inside and I stayed in the car. I heard the teenagers say they were creeped out and couldn't get the pump to work, and they left in a hurry. I was watching the car in front of us and the 2 men had not moved at all. Not an inch. They weren't talking, they weren't on their phones. They were just standing there, still as stone. My sister and mom came running back out to the car, and when they got in, the 2 men slowly turned to look at us while not moving or pivoting the rest of their bodies. And I swear to everything, we all saw the same thing. They had eyes dark as pitch and empty. Truly empty. Not black, not reflecting any light at all, just a void. We sped out of there and didn't stop until we were in the next city. Number 5, Coincidence. When I was 37, I went to my high school reunion. I flew into the nearest airport and rented a car. The distance was about 35 miles through a very rural and almost abandoned part of the country. About 3 miles outside of town, I see someone on the side of the road, flagging me down. Turned out that it was one of the guys I had attended school with, Jim, not his name. Gets in the car and we start talking. I had not seen him in 20 years, but he still looked the same, maybe a little older. And I asked him if he wants to come to the VFW and have a drink. He says, no, just take me home. Jim's parents had lived only a few blocks from my grandmother's house, and I turned in that direction, but he said to take him to the outskirts of town. There was a mobile home park out there, and I figured that is where he lived. When we reached the end of the turn off, he said, just drop me off. It was good to see you again. And he walks off into the night. I went to the VFW, met some of my old classmates, and we started to talk. As we were talking about who was coming to the reunion, I mentioned that I had just picked up Jim up 3 miles east of town and had dropped him off. Everyone gets quiet. Even the guy singing karaoke stops and lays down the mic. My cousin goes white as a new t-shirt. Barb, Jim passed away on that curve 8 years ago. Rolled his car. We were all at his funeral. I was told. I started to feel really dizzy and I went out to the car to take some deep breaths. There on the seat is the local newspaper printed 8 years previous containing Jim's obituary. I still have the paper. Number 4, dangerous technique. After we moved into our home, we were told a woman had passed there at the hands of her abusive husband. She hated men. My dad would wake up with scratches all over himself, and whenever my brother was mean to my sister, or I, he would have scratches on him as well. One day my brother hurt our sister and he hit her with something. When he woke up later that night, he had a horrible bloody nose. The day we moved out, my brother accidentally broke his twin's arm trying out a new wrestling move. He swears that he would have passed that night if it wasn't our last in the house. Number 3, the Grim Reaper. I was standing in my parents' room talking to my very sick dad at the time. He was suffering from stage 4 esophageal cancer, and I got the feeling something was behind me. I looked towards the doorway to the living room and something about 4'6" and fully black was peeking around the corner, with its hands on the door frame. I ran towards it and it slipped back around the door. When I got outside the doorway, there was nothing. My dad was completely confused when I stepped back inside the room and told him. People who stayed at my house in my dad's final days claimed to have seen it. My mom saw the figure on multiple occasions in multiple places until he passed away. We haven't seen it since. Number 2, cursed. After my parents divorced when I was a teenager, I lived with my mother. I experienced lots of paranormal happenings. Several times when I was reading in my bed, the room would start to feel really icy. Next, it would feel as if something or somebody that hated me was staring at me. When I got that feeling, I would leave the room and come back an hour later. Sometimes during the day, I would see a shadow figure sneaking along my bedroom walls. Something in the flat was pretending to be my dog. I went into my room and heard a deep growl from under the bed. My dog wasn't capable of making a noise that deep. It sounded like either a really big dog or a man doing his best dog impersonation. Other times my dog would whimper and pace in the room next to mine, but wouldn't come in when called, as if he was afraid of something in the hallway. When I moved in with my father, the paranormal activity just stopped. Number 1, ghost landlord. Shortly after college, I got married. We immediately moved into a basement apartment because that's all that was available within our budget. This place had a poltergeist, and my wife was terrified. Whatever resided there with us made it clear it wanted to live alone. Dishes, glasses, and other items would fly off the shelf. My wife was hit several times. There was always an ominous feeling like we were being watched. At night when we walked through the apartment in the dark, there would be insanely bright flashes of light that would illuminate the entire room. One night while we were going to bed, as soon as my wife and I walked into the bedroom, we heard a voice from nowhere say, "My name, move." My wife looked at me, I looked at her, I said loudly, "You've got it, bud," and we moved out 2 days later and stayed with family. The old lady who owned the place passed away a few months later, and the house was torn down. It is still an empty lot to this day, nothing but grass and a tree. I still drive by it every now and then. Number 10, interrogated. From Redditor Just Bronze Stuff. I was at this guy's birthday party and he invited me to sleep over. After everyone left, he locked his door and got a military flashlight and a camera. The dude proceeded to interrogate me at very private or uncomfortable levels, and every time I refused to answer, he'd hit me with the flashlight. He had to take a leak and locked the door on the way out, leaving me locked in. I didn't have a cell phone at the time, but he did have a phone there. I left a desperate voicemail at my house and hoped for the best. It took my mom 3 hours to listen and go pick me up. By the time she arrived, I was scared, bruised, and crying. It was one of the worst experiences of my life. Number 9, home invasion. From Redditor K. Iller Orange Cat, my friend Bobby's mother would not let him come over and spend the night, but she told him it was alright if I came over and spent the night with him. I was really in the mood for a sleepover, so I went ahead and did it. I woke up feeling thirstier than I ever could have imagined. Getting up, I stumbled out of bed and downstairs while not turning on any light at all. When I walked into the kitchen, I turned on the light. Immediately, I saw a huge man at the far window. Actually, he was going through the window. He was half in and half out. I was terrified, but before the guy could get all the way through the window, I screamed and ran in the other direction and ran back upstairs, back to Bobby's mother's room. I pounded on the door. Bobby had woken up and he came into the hallway before his mom had opened the door. Finally, the door opened. She looked at us and then suddenly passed us. Both Bobby and I turned and noticed the man reaching the top of the stairs. Quickly, she ushered us into the room and locked the door. She called 911 and then grabbed her gun from the closet. She told the guy who was now rattling the door that she had a gun and would use it. That didn't deter him until she fired off a shot, and he ran off. Number 8, Not So Secret Admirer. From Redditor Torvan, some friends and I were staying at another friend's house. I'm a girl for context. One of my friends, I'll call her Steph, was always very open to the fact that she thought I was smoking hot. I felt a bit weirded out sometimes because I wasn't sure if she was being serious or not. I didn't mind whether or not she liked me, but sometimes it would get a little too much and she'd say things like, "Oh, the things I'd do to you." So at this sleepover, Steph, our other friends, and I began to play a game. It started off as a bit of fun, but soon Steph started to get rough and would tackle me to the ground and pin me there. I was genuinely a little bit scared, and the other girls started to notice that it was a little bit too close for comfort. So we did what we had to do. We each grabbed one of Steph's limbs and proceeded to tie her arms behind her back and her legs together. It took a good 20 minutes because Steph is very strong and quite persistent. Eventually we managed to keep her down and we proceeded to watch television. That is until somehow Steph managed to escape. This was like a horror film stuff. We all ran upstairs, the 3 other girls made it to a bedroom and I ran into the bathroom. I locked myself inside and Steph started banging on the door. I don't know how long I was in there for, but it started to get bright and Steph was outside the whole time, waiting for me to come out. I slept in the bathtub that night. Number 7, Imaginary Intruder. From Redditor Bubblegum B-Word, I spent the night at my friend Brittany's house with a bunch of other girls in our class. After her parents went to bed, one of the girls told a really scary story about an intruder breaking into the house and removing everyone's free trial of life. Suddenly, we heard noises from outside. It was probably the house settling in retrospect, and we all raced to the downstairs bathroom and stuffed ourselves in it, locking the doors behind us. So there were about 5 girls in this bathroom for God knows how long. We were all whimpering and scared. Eventually, one of the girls had to use the bathroom, and pretty soon the toilet is full with all of our waste and we're too scared to flush it. Number 6, Not Invited. From Diadact YT, one of my friends had a sleepover birthday party. It was pretty normal stuff. About 30 minutes after everyone had gotten there, someone knocked on the door. A kid whose parents were friends with my friend's parents. Apparently he didn't have a lot of friends, so he got invited. It only took a few minutes to realize why he didn't have many friends. He was mean, physical, and would try to one-up everyone. A little later in the night, we decided to wrestle each other. That's when the night took a dark turn. He punched one of the kids in the groin, so one of the other guys went up to him and gave him a swift punch to the sternum. He fell straight to the ground. For the rest of the night, the kid didn't say a word to anyone and hid in the basement for most of the night. Number 5, Strict Rules. From Neapolitan Mew, I went to my friend's house for the first time as she wanted to come to my house, not the other way around. However, she had never told me why. I was about to learn the truth the hard way. So I got there, and after the first hour, it all went downhill. The parents had strict rules about eating at the table. They proceeded to insult me about my weight to the point I nearly cried. After that, they continued to ask me questions about my race and my family. By the time night came, I found out they had a lockdown rule in their house. We weren't allowed out of the bedroom until morning. I didn't know that and ended up getting lectured the next morning. I also didn't know that I would be forced to attend their church in the morning before I could go home. That's how I figured out why she always wanted to stay at my house and not the other way around. Number 4, Not a Role Model. From Himalayan Doobie, one night I stayed over at my friend's house and his dad, who was an alcoholic, was really angry and got angrier as he drank more. We could hear him upstairs swearing and banging stuff around and stomping on the floor. After a while, he came downstairs and started yelling at my friend for something he did wrong. A few seconds later, he pushed my friend across the room, hard. My friend looked like he was hurt badly. Then his dad came charging over and dragged me towards the hallway closet and threw me in there. He told me to keep my mouth shut and to let this be a lesson for hanging around his son. A few hours later, the noise stopped. I tried escaping, but somehow he locked the door and I didn't want to bang on it because I thought he was going to hurt me. I just sat there crying for what felt like forever. Eventually the door opened and it was my friend telling me to hurry up and leave. Luckily, I didn't have far to get home. Number 3. Haunted Tea Set. From Interrogation 2, my friend's mom was into all those weird ghost hunting and Bigfoot shows, so over dinner she made me watch one where people went around communicating with ghosts. I was really young and had never seen anything like that before, so I believed her mom telling me it was real. I also believed her when she said the silver tea set on the dresser is haunted by my grandmother. I've seen her ghost cleaning it at night. Their house had a creepy old style feel to it too, so I was terrified to sleep. After I finally fell asleep, I was awoken suddenly by the sound of silverware rattling outside the door. I'll never forget the feeling of being frozen in fear like that. Number 2. Rumors. From Soy Brookie, I slept at the popular girl's house who lived across the road from the school. Dinner was good, we got to have ice cream afterwards, and I loved staring at the fire in her fireplace. There was a rumor at school that her older brother and sister had tried to end a kid by pushing him into a pit at a house party. I don't know if it was true or not, but as a kid, it was in the back of my mind. We went to sleep at around 9:30 p.m., which was quite early for me. I woke up a few hours later sweating with a warm pressure on my chest. I was freaked out. I couldn't see what it was right away, then I realized it was their cat, curled up under my chin and purring. It really spooked me, so I had their mom drop me back home in the middle of the night. Number 1. Lonely Granny. I stayed over at my best friend's house for almost every week when I was in elementary school. Their grandmother lived with them and everyone treated her like a burden. They told me she was crazy and mean, but she was always very kind to me. And because I was raised to be nice to my elders, I was kind in return. One day when my friend had to go to talk to her mom about something, the grandma asked me into her room. I had never been in there and it was decorated completely differently from the rest of the house. I could tell she had moved an entire house's worth of stuff into one bedroom. I can't remember our conversation, but she gave me a little metal bracelet and asked me to hide it from the family. I was scared to wear it as I didn't want my friend to get mad.
At number 10 spot, we have the Exorcism of Gina. In the year 1990, New York native Reverend James LaBarre oversaw 3 different exorcisms, all of which were approved by both the Cardinal John O'Connor, which was the Archbishop of New York at the time, and even the Vatican. One of these cases, the exorcism of the Florida girl Gina, was broadcast on national television in 1991 on the ABC network. The ceremony, which featured music in the style of the Middle Ages, was described by Newsweek as, quote, nothing more than the needless agony of a severely unhappy young girl. She was restrained to a chair, screaming and barking incoherently as the Reverend thrust a cross into her face and even threatened Gina's purported demons with torture if they desired it. And on top of that, others alleged that she was speaking in different languages that she had never known before, and her voice kept altering in ways her family have never heard before.
And blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and in the hour of our death.
That's part of the objection of the demons to leaving.
Somebody help me! I said I don't want to go!
For those who were tuned in, it was very painful to watch. At a number 9 spot, we have Terence Cottrell. Slight trigger warning for this part. Terence Cottrell, an 8-year-old kid with autism, passed away in 2003 during a prayer service that was designed to drive away the demonic spirits allegedly responsible for his illness. Yeah. In August 2003, a small group of Christians gathered at the Faith Temple Church in Milwaukee in order to rid the child of apparent demons. They would wrap the kid in cloth, all while pressing down on him. They would scream at the devil to leave his body for hours. Around the 2-hour mark, they noticed the kid stop breathing, and according to CNN, Terence was suffocated and external chest compression was determined to be the cause of death. The boy said to have stopped breathing when Reverend Hemphill sat on his chest. The minister was found guilty of murder immediately. During the ensuing trial, it came to light that Reverend Hemphill had received no formal religious training and was ordained by his older brother. He was convicted of child abuse and sentenced to 2.5 years in prison and 7.5 years under state supervision. At number 8 spot, we have Elizabeth Knapp. Just 20 years before the infamous Salem witch trials, there was a demonic possession case reported that could be one of the earliest known cases we have today. Elizabeth Knapp was a 16-year-old girl who lived in Groton, Massachusetts. The story goes that Elizabeth was the servant at a household of Reverend Samuel Willard. He would be known for his close clergies where he would frequently talk about the devil corrupting the youth. So when he started to notice Elizabeth showing those signs, he quickly took action. Elizabeth would show signs such as emotional fits, hysterical laughing, and at one point she began to have hallucinations. And this is when the Reverend decided he would call a medical doctor, but when no cure could be found, they just claimed that she was actually possessed by the devil. According to Knapp, the ordeal began when she was visited by the devil one night and made a pact with him. She would sell her soul in exchange for things like money and youth. So when the priest talked to the girl, he noted that it was as if he was talking to the devil directly through the young girl's body. In 1672, Willard's journal entries about Knapp ceased to exist, and to this day, nobody is sure what really happened to this possessed young girl. At number 7 spot with Anna Eklund. The early exorcism, otherwise known as the Exorcism of Anna Eklund, is a famous case of demonic possession, not only in the state of Iowa, but throughout the entire world. The Exorcist movie took small bits of inspiration from what went down in this case. At a young age, she would suffer from demonic voices in her head to do unimaginable things. In the beginning, you could make an argument for schizophrenia, but as time went by, she found herself unable to enter a church, could detect food that has been blessed, and even would despise other holy objects. Her family sought out help from Father Reisinger, who was specialized in exorcism. To test if she was faking, the priest sprayed her with fake holy water and she didn't react. Then on June 18, 1912, the priest performed an exorcism on 30-year-old Anna, and after, she was back to normal. Except in the next few years, Anna claimed to be tormented by the spirit of her dead father and aunt. So Reisinger came back, except this time in secret. During the exorcism, Anna dislodged herself from the bed, floated in the air, and apparently howled extremely loud. When asked who possessed Anna, the demon responded, "It's Beelzebub." Judas Iscariot, Anna's father, and her aunt Mina. After the exorcism was complete, Anna lived out her life quietly until her passing in 1941. At a number 6 spot, we have the Son of Sam. During 1976 to 1977, American serial killer David Berkowitz, otherwise known as the Son of Sam, would go on a spree killing 6 people and wounding an additional 7. He would leave behind letters at his crime scenes indicating that a mysterious figure known as Papa Sam was responsible. It was then revealed by his neighbor that Sam was in fact only his dog, but he claimed that his pet was possessed by a 6,000-year-old man who used to drink human blood. So fast forward to prison, he even warned the police that there was more killings that was going to happen, and because he was only one puppet to a very large satanic cult. And obviously they couldn't care less about what this guy had to say. I mean, he was in prison for murdering 6 people. Why would anyone listen to him? But back to the murder he predicted. On the early morning of Halloween in 1981, 39-year-old Ronald Sisman and 20-year-old Elizabeth Platzman were beaten and shot to death. David predicted all of this, including the exact apartment layout, and when the police questioned Ronald Sisman's friends, they said he had never met David or was part of any satanic cult. In the hump of our list, we have the Conjuring House. In January 1971, the Perron family moved into a 14-room farmhouse in Harrisville, Rhode Island, where Carolyn, Roger, and their 5 daughters began to notice strange things happening almost immediately after they moved in. Carolyn would notice that the broom went missing or seemed to have moved from place to place on its own. She would also hear the sound of something scraping against the kettle in the kitchen when no one was there. She would find small piles of dirt in the center of a newly cleaned kitchen floor, but that could just be the kids. Caroline allegedly researched the history of the home and discovered that it had been in the same family for 8 generations, and that many of them had passed away under mysterious or even horrible circumstances. Several of the children who used to live in the home had drowned in the nearby lake, one was murdered, and a few of them hanged themselves in the attic. Over the next 10 years that the family lived in the house, the Warrens made multiple trips to investigate, and at one point Lorraine conducted a seance to attempt to contact the spirits that were possessing the family. But during the seance, Carolyn Perron would become possessed, speaking in tongues, and rising from the ground in her chair. At number 4 spot, we have George Luckens. In 1778, former tailor George Luckens showcased pretty odd behavior. He would be speaking in a strange, manipulative voice, all while singing hymns backwards, and many people reported that the sounds you're hearing are sounds that humans just can't make. A member of the parish named Sarah Baber first came across George, and she always knew him prior, describing him as a good church-going man with no previous issues whatsoever. When taken to the doctors, no one knew what was up with him. George would later claim that he was being possessed by 7 demons, and that 7 clergymen would be needed to drive them out. So in a ceremony held in Bristol's Temple Church, 7 priests commanded the demons who would apparently take over Lucken's soul to leave once and and for all. The ceremony ended in a success with the demon being driven out of George, causing all of his problems to go away, including his consistent seizures. Guess this one was a happy ending. What a surprise. At number 3 spot, we have Michael Taylor. This story goes when Michael's wife accused him of cheating, and she would back this up by claiming that his behavior was very unusual and not like him. And he never did that type of stuff before. He would do this all while shouting at her in tongues, and this is when a group of people had to restrain him. She described his appearance as bestial and how he was staring at her with this wild look in his eyes. His behavior got so bad they decided to seek out help in the form of priests. During an 8-hour exorcism session, the priest claimed to have pulled out a total of 40 demons. But they left 3 of them in him, which happened to be murder, madness, and violence. Then they sent him home for some reason. This was an obvious red flag, and Michael would be found hours later in the street naked and covered in blood. When the police arrived at the home, they discovered one of the most brutal sights they've ever seen. Michael had brutally attacked Christine, removing her eyes and tongue before ripping her face from her skull. He then strangled the family dog, and once the dog passed away, he removed its eyes as well before breaking the dog into different pieces, throwing it all around the house. At number 2 spot, with Annelise Michelle. This is the same case that inspired the movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose. Annelise was a normal girl growing up, but by the time she hit the age of 16, everything changed. She began to see the face of the devil everywhere she went, and shortly after, many people, including herself, believed that she was actually possessed by a real demon. A total of 67 exorcisms were done, and they sounded a little something like this.
Kapiert?
Da soll schon etwas zu sagen.
Weil
der Teufel größere Macht.
Unfortunately, they did nothing good for this poor girl, and she ended up passing away from malnourishment and dehydration. Were these the true sounds of a demon or a troubled girl just looking for proper help? You guys be the judge of that. At number 1 spot, we have Claire Germano Seal. In 1906, a 16-year-old Claire Seal was heard making a pact with Satan himself, meaning no good implications follow the story. Then shortly after, nuns at the orphanage school she was at claimed that Seal was growling, hissing, ripping her clothes off, and demanding to speak with priest Father Erasmus Horner. At the time, the nuns and priests reported that she had the strength of an adult and spoke different foreign languages in which she had never been exposed to. Then out of the blue, she began to levitate, causing Father Horner and Reverend Mansuti to report it, and they gained permission to conduct an exorcism. It lasted a total of 2 days. Her skin was constantly burning due to the holy water, and she was caught levitating by over 150 witnesses. Everyone noted smelling a distinct noxious smell leaving her body, as they suspected when the devil finally left her.
Number 10, the truck. From Redditor Sack of Mangoes, back in college I was driving home one late night, a 2-hour drive. I noticed this truck with round-shaped headlights following me on the freeway. Just thought we happened to be going the same way. Each freeway change, it was still following me. 50 miles later, it was still following me, staying behind me at a constant speed and good distance. I got a bit agitated. 2 hours later, I finally reached my exit to my hometown and it exited. I knew something was up. I instantly pulled into a 24-hour McDonald's drive-thru to see if it followed me still, and it followed me into the parking lot, and realizing I pulled in line to a drive-thru, it U-turned and drove off. When I left the McDonald's parking lot, I was paranoid that the truck was waiting just around the corner to re-follow me again. Luckily, it never reappeared, so I went home. To this day, I'm still not sure what its deal was. Number 9, Ghost Truck. From Redditor Testing the Theory, we were leaving a wedding we had attended that was held about 3 hours from home. My boyfriend had stayed sober in order to drive us home, and I was pretty crunk. As we were driving the dark country backroads to get back to the city, I was half dozing. I remember squinting because there seemed to be bright headlights washing over us, and then my boyfriend who was driving started screaming. Like full on screaming. Like I've never heard him do before or since. He swerved our car sharply to the side of the road, nearly into a ditch. I was now fully awake and said, "What? Are you okay?" He said that he saw a truck coming full bore towards us in the dark and honestly thought we were going to pass away. I looked behind us, a long straight road with no houses or streetlights. There was no sign of a truck or any kind of vehicle. No rear headlights on the road or any light from a truck's headlights, which we would have seen, and no sound of a truck or car or anything. But he was shaking, and I initially brushed it off as him maybe falling asleep at the wheel, which is already scary in and of itself. Number 8, the fake forest. From Redditor Team Mako N7, Many years ago, a friend and I decided to visit our mutual friend at her university and spend the weekend with her. We had extremely detailed directions to follow, and we were told the trip should take about 3 hours. While nothing went wrong on our drive, it seemed to take forever. I don't remember exactly at what point the woods started, but I do remember traveling through these woods for a long time, perhaps an hour. We were already well past the 3-hour time frame my friend had given us by the time we left the woods. When we finally reached my friend's college town, it was nearly 4.5 hours since we'd left. We didn't get lost. We never hit traffic or stopped for more than a few minutes, but we quickly forgot about it since we were happy to spend the weekend with our friend. When the trip back was a little over 3 hours, we thought it was weird, but didn't think much of it at the time. It wasn't until my next trip to visit that I realized something had been strange. I spent that whole next trip waiting for the long path through the woods that we had been on the first time, but it never appeared. Following the same directions as the first time, the entire trip took me about 3 hours, as did every other trip I made out there in the following years. I don't know what happened, and I've never been able to replicate it. I still wonder what happened and where we really were when passing through those woods. Number 7, the voice of his mother. From a former Redditor, this story is from my grandpa. He's a retired long-distance truck driver, and he often drove through the night and early hours of the morning over unfamiliar roads. This one particular day, when my grandpa was in his 30s, it was between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m., and he was driving down a twisting country road that was so narrow, only one vehicle could fit at a time. If two vehicles met from different locations, one would have to pull off the road to let the other pass. The road was empty, save for my grandpa. On the right side of the road, there was thick woodland, and on the left, open fields and a lake. There were no street lights. The only light came from my grandpa's truck and the moon. It was pretty lonely. My grandpa was going steadily down the road and going a bit faster than he should have. When my grandpa said this, I always took it to mean he was blazing down the road as fast as the truck could go. He was listening to the radio and probably not paying much attention when he suddenly felt hands on his shoulder and a voice whisper his name in his ear. So close that he felt the breath on his skin, he recognized the voice, and it belonged to his mother, who had passed away a few years previously. Naturally, this spooked my grandpa, and he instinctively hit the brakes. Seconds later, his headlights lit up a pile of 3 crashed cars that took up the entire road. My grandpa stopped just short of the wreckage. If he hadn't braked when he did, he would have plowed straight into the cars. Number 6, end of the line. From Redditor Chase Sarah, I was driving from California to Ohio with my mom, and we were somewhere in the middle of South Dakota. The sun had gone down and my check engine light had recently come on when the highway just ended. The entire road was under construction and had been completely removed. All that remained was a dirt road with the occasional orange sign. We were the only car in sight, and there were no buildings or any sign of life around. The combination of the dirt road, total darkness beyond our headlights, and the check engine light made for the longest white-knuckle drive of my life. Number 5, Highway to Hell. From Redditor N. Doyle Worker, pulling into the back-end oil field in North Dakota. I was in a large RV pulling a truck. I just turned off a road that didn't seem to exist. Dirt, huge holes, and small boulders in the road construction, GPS said. Happily, I pulled onto this 2-lane highway at 1 a.m. No one was on the road, but huge Mad Max looking tractor trailers passing me at 80 miles per hour. The wind was whipping my tin can around like it had a grudge. I crested a large hill, and all I saw were low-lying clouds glowing orangish red. The hills all had huge flames coming out of them, flares for natural gas burn off. The scene was like hell. Driving for hours through a valley populated only by fire and demonic trucks with an orange sky and a land 2,000 miles from my own. Number 4, Exploding Meteor. From Redditor 7 League Boots, it wasn't inexplicable by any means, but I was coming back from giving a presentation in northern Vermont in late February in 2012 at about 10 or 10:30 p.m. Snow everywhere, extremely clear sky, bright stars, etc. All of a sudden, there was this enormous blue flash of light that lit up everything from horizon to horizon. Sort of like a blue emergency light, but immensely stronger. A meteor had come down and exploded overhead, illuminating everything briefly. The meteor itself turned out to have been visible from Norfolk to Ottawa, but only a few places got lit up like Vermont did. Number 3, Alien Encounter. From Mr. Fuzzy Bagels, I was driving through Kansas on I-70 at night once when I was hit with one of the craziest thunderstorms I've ever seen. It was so bad the road started flooding a bit and I had to pull into a service plaza and wait it out. Then the creepy part happened. As I was sitting in the truck watching the storm, there was a series of lightning strikes followed by a blackout. Suddenly, a massively bright light starts moving behind the clouds. Too slowly to be an aircraft, but too fast to be part of the storm system. It moves up over the hills or trees before crossing directly overhead, then disappears a bit behind the service plaza. The transit from tree line to plaza took maybe 5 to 10 minutes tops, and while it was overhead, it cast everything in an eerie blue glow and lit up the parking lot. I seriously thought aliens were invading. Anyway, within 10 minutes of the creepy light disappearing, the rain completely stopped and the parking lot lights came back on. Like someone flipped a switch. I got out of there while looking in my mirrors for spaceships or those alien walkers from War of the Worlds. Number 2, the roll cage saved him. From user Foxbody, going to get a damn Christmas tree with my then GF, driving my then beautiful 85 Yoda. It's been snowing, but the roads are pretty clear. I'm cruising at maybe 50 around a gentle bend, which leads to a bridge. There's a little bump where the concrete transitions to the bridge. This happens to mark where a large patch of black ice starts. Soon as the rear tires hit the bump, the rear end pops out 90 degrees and the car slides sideways directly through the oncoming lane of traffic, at the guardrail. I have enough time to say, holy S, this isn't happening, before I hit the guardrail head on, which flips the truck and it begins rolling. Rolled maybe 4 or 5 times down the whole length of the bridge, ending up on the shoulder of the opposite side of the road, 2 feet from sliding down a cliff towards a river. Roll cage saved my life, I'm pretty sure. Number 1, Minefield. This last entry comes from Bob Rayner. Driving through a minefield whilst arguing with the co-driver about which route had been cleared of mines. There was definitely one mine-free route. I remember seeing somebody post a GPS trail on the internet. Wasn't it over there? All this sand and scrub looks the same. Yikes.
Coming in at our number 10 spot, we have The Red Piano. The Red Piano is a well-known Russian story that revolves around a little girl who receives a piano as a birthday present. However, there's a catch. If anything happens to this piano, only one lady in the town has the ability to fix it. So the girl starts off very excited to learn how to play, but after a few weeks of playing, she begins to complain to her parents that her fingers hurt a lot after playing for a while. Her parents reassure her that it's normal because she's new to playing, and hey, this is actually a thing. However, in this case, as the girl continues to practice, she grows thinner and paler, and the piano eventually decides to break down. The family then calls the one lady in town to fix it, and she requests to be left alone while she repairs the instrument. When she finishes, the girl continues to play, but her health continues to deteriorate, and the piano breaks once again. This time, the parents are very curious and peek through the keyhole to see what the old lady is doing to their piano, and to their horror, they see her drinking blood from a glass jar that she took out of the piano. As it turns out, the piano keys had tiny little needles built into them that were almost invisible to the naked eye. When the girl played the piano, the needles would cut her fingers and the piano would drain her blood. The piano was then designed to break when the jar was full of blood so that the old lady could come and drink it. Didn't know how this ended up as a bedtime story, but it did. And it's definitely terrifying. Number 9, The Girl Without Hands. The Girl Without Hands is a haunting dark tale of a father's deal with the devil that leaves his daughter mutilated for life. Pretty tragic. The story starts with a desperate father who agrees to sell whatever is standing behind his mill in exchange for some much needed money. Little did he know, the man he is dealing with was the devil himself, who sees all of this as an opportunity to claim the man's soul. To the father's dismay, it turns out that his daughter was standing behind the mill at the time, and so when the devil tries to take her away, she fights back with all of her might. But the devil is not one to be thwarted with easily. He demands that the father chop off his daughter's hands and give them to him in exchange for letting them go. As repulsive as this idea was, the father had no choice but to comply, as the devil threatened to take him away instead. With a heavy heart and tears in his eyes, the father then chopped off his daughter's hands and gave them to the devil. I could only imagine the terror on the children's faces after being told this during bedtime. Again, I don't know how this ended up as a bedtime story, but it did. The Lotus Pawn. I always got this good feeling every time I see a lotus looking pond, but after this story, my thoughts are a little bit different. It all started with a young couple that were deeply in love and planning to marry. They decided to meet at midnight at the Lotus Pond, where they would start their new life together. However, things didn't go as planned, and the boy never showed up. The girl was left waiting and waiting until she eventually left, and then to her surprise, she saw her boyfriend with another woman, which completely shattered her heart. The heartbroken girl couldn't take the pain away and returned to this Lotus Pawn where she drowned herself. Months later, another couple decided to meet at the exact same spot, but tragedy struck again. As the boy was waiting for his girlfriend to arrive, he heard a female voice behind him say, quote, "I asked you to meet me at midnight, didn't I?" Confused, he answered no. Then suddenly, eyewitnesses claimed to see two pale white hands reach out of the water and drag him down under. Ever since then, the Lotus Pawn has been known as a cursed place in many Asian countries due to this bedtime story. At a number 7 spot, we have Bus 375. The story of Bus 375 is a very tragic one, and it takes us back to November 14th, 1995 in Summer Palace's bus terminal in China. Bus 375, also known as the Midnight Bus or the Bus to Fragrant Hills, pulled into the terminal as the last bus of the night. But that night, something happened that defied all logic and explanation. As the bus driver began to make his final run, two passengers boarded the bus, an old man and a young one. But as they headed towards the last stop, the driver spotted three shadows waving at the side of the road. Being a kind-hearted soul, the driver decided to stop and let the three men board the bus. However, something was off about them. Their faces were indistinguishable and they appeared to be floating since none of them had any feet. Shortly after the three men boarded, the old man picked a fight with the young man on board, accusing him of stealing his wallet. The argument escalated and the two were eventually kicked off of the bus. However, as the bus drove away, the old man's demeanor suddenly changed. He told the young man that he just saved their lives, as the three passengers who just got on earlier were actually ghosts. The following day, Bus 375 was reported missing, only to be found 3 days later at the bottom of a lake. Inside the bus, there were 3 decomposed corpses, believed to be the same ghosts who had boarded the bus the previous night. Number 6, the Black Volga. The legend of the Black Volga was told to many European kids, and it refers to a mysterious black or red GA721 or GAZ24 car that was allegedly used to abduct and murder people in the 1960s and 70s in countries like Poland, Romania, Hungary, Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, Greece, and Mongolia. According to different versions of the legend, the car was driven by various nefarious characters. These included communist police, Russian mafia, and some say even Satanists. But there are some say even Satan himself drove it, with some versions saying that the victims were kidnapped for their blood, which was supposedly used as a cure for rich Westerners or Arabs suffering from leukemia. The legend of the Black Volga even spawned various variations, such as the car having horns instead of wing mirrors, the number 666 on the license plate. In the hump of our list, we have the Mystery House. In a small neighborhood, there were 5 houses very close to one another, all except one, which everyone referred to as the Mystery House. The children in the neighborhood often made up stories about who they thought lived there and what they thought was inside. Then one day, a boy went to play in the nearby wooded area with his G.I. Joes when he suddenly felt like someone was watching him. He decided to pack up and go home, but before he left, he heard a girl's voice say, quote, "You don't have to leave." He turned back to see a little girl with messy hair and a thick flannel shirt buttoned up all the way to the top. They struck up a friendship and played together for weeks to come. The little girl explained that she lived in the Mystery House and that her room was the entire top floor, almost like an attic. Her room had one window that looked out into the wooded area. However, after a while, the little girl disappeared and stopped coming out to play. A few months later, the Mystery House went up for sale, and the boy's family went to the open house so that everyone could see what was inside finally. But instead, the family met the couple that lived in the house and they explained that their daughter had passed away a few years prior. This revelation made the boy's head spin as he had just played with a little girl a few months before. He wondered who he had been playing with this whole time. Then a few days later, he went back into the wooded area and looked up at the window that the little girl had explained was the window to her room. When he looked up, he saw the mother staring back at him expressionless. It was then that he realized it had been the mother all along, pretending to be her deceased daughter. Number 4, the Sweet Girl of Ankle Bridge. This tale follows a young singer who met their fate on a dark and unfamiliar bridge. The young woman's name was Mariam, a girl who is said to haunt Ankle Bridge in Indonesia and cause fatal accidents to those who walk it. Legend has it that Mariam was a beautiful maid who was in grave danger from a rich man. She feared for her life and ran, but the man had money and goons. They chased her, she ran fast, but eventually cornered her on this bridge. And from the 1960s all the way to the 1970s, it's said that her spirit wreaked havoc on men who walked this bridge. Number 3, Room 111. Room 111 is a story that has evolved over time. and it revolves around a science undergraduate who believes he had discovered the key to time travel. In the original version of the story, there is a man who wraps himself in a mechanism of wires attached to an alarm clock and a battery in room 111. He believes that when the alarm clock goes off, he will be able to travel through time. However, things go terribly wrong. When his friends try to find out his whereabouts, they discover him in room 111 with a note laying beside his deceased body saying, quote, "I will come back." This is when apparently the friend went on a slippery slope to insanity and was later admitted to a psychiatric hospital only a few days after entering this room. Number 2, the Red Room. If you're an internet troll who likes messing with people or just an ordinary TikTok scroller, you're all a potential victim of the Red Room. The Red Room curse is a Japanese story that emerges from the depths of the internet, in which the user receives an unexpected and unwelcome pop-up ad. You see a red screen with black text that reads, "Do you like the Red Room?" Then you hear a sinister voice repeat the phrase. No matter how many times you close the pop-up, it will continue to appear until the voice has finished its question. Once completed, your screen will flood with red, then names start to pile, the names of the victims. No one knows what happens after that, but one thing is always the same. No one really knows what happens after that. Number 1, Zhang XI. Also known as the Chinese hopping vampire, the Zhang XI comes from a phrase meaning stiff corpse. They are psychic vampire zombies. Yes, you heard that right. Who feed off of a person's chi rather than their blood. And for those who don't know, chi is considered to be a person's life force, which means that it's energy that flows through you and your entire body, basically giving you life in a sense. So unlike the vampires we have over here, the Zhang XI prefers not to consume humans or our blood, and they also aren't able to walk as they are seen hopping around with their hands out front to maintain their balance. Well, these are the top 10 scary bedtime stories you should never read at 3 a.m. What do you guys think about this list? Leave a comment down below with your thoughts and some suggestions for some future videos. I'm your host Andrew. Click that like button, subscribe, and that bell notification so you never miss a future video again. Hope you guys have a scary day.